All right, everybody, we're live. Hope everyone can hear me okay. If you're in the chat, if anything's wrong, just give me a shout out before we get started here. I am going to, I don't see if anyone, oh, there it is, 2 in the chat, okay. Yeah, we'll give it a couple of minutes here and see if we get some more people joining in. But hey, Dude Rocks, thanks for coming. And I will post something here in the comments. All right. Well, hopefully we'll get more than 2 people. Oh, there's 5. Okay. All right. So people are still funneling in. We'll give it just a couple of minutes before we get started. Bama Rush, how's it going? Samantha's here. All right. As we ramp up for this, this is going to be a short show. I'm going to try to keep it to around an hour. And then we'll exit from here. But before we get started, the premise of this is viewer choice. So if you have been thinking about a bourbon, not sure about a bourbon that you can readily get available in the stores, let me know. If I have it, I will, or if I just know about it, I'll tell you about it. But if I have it, we'll maybe do a comparison against something else. Robot Scott's here. But please direct any suggestions or comments toward Crazy Ann. She's in the basement down there. She's helping me out. Crazy Ann from Norway. So before we get started, though, I do want to say I have one suggestion I'd like to throw out. And I know people like Eagle Rare, and Eagle Rare sometimes is kind of hard to get. It's part of the Beam Suntory line. You know, they make Blantons and all kind of stuff. So, and of course that goes all the way up through your legendary Pappy line and all that, which it's all right. If you like Eagle Rare and you cannot find Eagle Rare, my suggestion is Michter's, and I have tried them side by side. This is just the regular old the Michter small batch. The regular, you know, just small batch US1. From my experience, it costs about the same. And side by side, Eagle Rare is a little bit better, but this is absolutely spot on mark with it. So there we have that. All right, so I have in the comment or in the description down below, I got tired of typing bourbon names. So if there's anything down there you want to see on here, go for it, type it in. If not, I'm going to start putting stuff against stuff. So Jason Patton's here. Hey, thanks for joining in. I am going to start with, you know what, I'm going to start with the good old Elijah Craig. This is what I recommended to my son. He wanted to try bourbon for the first time, and I call this a honeysuckle bourbon. So we'll pour just a little bit of this. Now this is just regular old Elijah Craig small batch, and I'm not going to be pouring much because if y'all have me drinking some bourbons, I don't want to have too much in my glass. This is the Elijah Craig small batch. Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey, 94 proof, 47% by volume. There it is. It is very reasonably priced. So, hey, my mom's here. Hi, Mom. I'm drinking bourbon. All right, so let's get a little air in here. And I know I reviewed this. If you go back and look, I believe I called it the Virgin Cork Pop, and it was my son and I doing a stream. We did a live stream, but it went private. I streamed it private to YouTube, downloaded it, edited the video a little, and put it back up. But yeah, if you can go watch that, you'll see that review of Elijah Craig. But this is just to get the taste buds going. Oh, that is sweet. This is one of the sweeter ones. Get that first sip out of the way. Good fruit notes in that. Like I said, honeysuckle is what it reminds me of. Pretty sweet down the center of the tongue, but it does have some decent notes on the sides. I would recommend this to anybody just wanting to start off trying bourbon neat. Like I said, it's one of the sweeter ones, and you know, if you can palate this, you can start getting some notes out of it. I don't really recommend, and I know I've caught some flack for talking bad about Jim Beam. I'm really not talking bad about Jim Beam. I'm just saying that those base bourbons that are the cheap end of the line, and they're usually 40% by volume, 80 proof, they're very large batches of bourbon, and a lot of the notes are hidden and subdued in those, because what they do is they mass produce the bourbon in tons of barrels, and it's all over the place. It's not in like a special warehouse. It's just, you know, around the outside of the rick houses. They don't taste every single barrel. They dump it all together and they add water to it to bring it down to that 80 proof. And to me, it gets a watery flavor to it, and it does hide a lot of the notes. If you really want to know what Jim Beam's supposed to taste like, I would suggest picking up a bottle of Jim Beam Single Barrel. This one here is a higher price point, but it's 95 proof, 47.5% alcohol by volume, and you're going to get a ton more notes out of this than you're going to get out of that base Jim Beam. So, you know, and the same thing goes with things like Jack Daniels, things like that. And that's Tennessee whiskey, but I do like Tennessee whiskey and different ones. So, all right. I know you'll hear me talking a lot on here, but just to recap, if you've watched any of my videos, you've probably heard me say it a few times. Let's go over what a bourbon is. A bourbon has to be at least 51% or more corn in the mash. Usually it's a higher than just 51%. It can be 100% corn in the mash, but it has to be at least 51%. And then there's secondary grains. And those are always going to be secondary, because if it has to be 51%, even if it's 51.49, your primary grain is still corn. And that adds to a lot of sweetness. Corn syrup, you know, sugary, corn sweet. There's different types of corn, though. There's white corn and other things. Then they usually are going to add malted barley, wheat, or rye. And that's what we see a lot. When you start getting into ryes, you'll get more floral notes. You'll get more what I call rose petal, but it can also, depending on how the master distiller puts it together and how they refine their mash bill, you can get spice notes. You can get clove. You can get allspice. Different things can come forward out of there. I do enjoy a really good rye. You know, if you want to really know what the notes are to a rye, just go get a rye whiskey and try it, and then try a high rye bourbon and compare them. You know, it's going to subdue it a little, but some of the higher ryes, I know few had a little more rye in it. Four Roses Single Barrel has some pretty good rye in it. I think it's about 36% rye. In the single barrel, if I'm remembering correctly. A lot of times though, when I get bourbons, I try not to look up too many things on the bourbons. I don't look up mash bills. I don't look up other people's reviews. I try to just open the bottle and bring you what is on the nose and the palate as I'm trying it. Dude Rocks, what do I think of Maker's Mark? I prefer Maker's 46. So regular Maker's Mark is, I used to drink old fashions. Like if I'm out somewhere and all they have is Maker's Mark. Now if they have Bullet, I'll get Bullet, neat. But if all they have is Maker's Mark and they're calling that their top shelf, I'll get a Maker's Old Fashioned. And I like the citrus muddled in the bottom, tiny bit of simple syrup in it. But Maker's is good. I enjoy Maker's, but the Maker's 46, what they do is it's called a finished bourbon. And what they do is they distill it and barrel it and age it, just like regular Maker's Mark. And then they add, and I don't know the process, and I think what they might do is just put French oak staves into the barrel with the bourbon while it's still in the barrel. I don't think they move it from one barrel to another. I think they have a way that they open the barrel up and put staves in and close it back off. I think. I'm not sure. But it seems like I saw a live stream or a video on it from someone who worked for Maker's Mark. If I'm wrong and anyone knows, let me know. But Maker's 46 is just a little bit more expensive than regular Maker's Mark. Not by a long shot, but it's really good. With that said, I'm gonna have to unclip the lavalier. I'm gonna go grab the Maker's, and we'll pour just a little bit of it. And thank you, dude, because you actually picked a bourbon I had on my other shelf. Oh, Buffalo Trace. Buffalo Trace, I call it the backwoods. They call it frontier bourbon. I really like Buffalo Trace a lot. And it's their base, one of their base bourbons, from Buffalo Trace. But it has really good notes, some earthy notes to it, some woody notes. I don't have any right now. It's very, very hard to get your hands on here in North Carolina. About once or twice a year, we're able to grab a couple of bottles of it, but I've finished it off. I call it the campfire bourbon. I love Buffalo Trace. Sitting around a camp, it makes me feel like I need to be outside drinking it, and have a little snifter out by the fire pit, and I think it's a fantastic bourbon. If I can get the cork out of this Maker's. All right, so this is Maker's 46. Right here. Let that camera zoom in there. Yeah, just says oak staves, but if you read the hype around it from Maker's Mark themselves, they say it's French oak staves. So, and of course, to finish off what constitutes a bourbon or what has to be a bourbon, the other thing is it has to be aged in new American oak barrels. They can't have been used. It can be finished in a different barrel. And we'll talk about other finished bourbons here just shortly. I know I don't really consider, Woodford Reserve double oaked as opposed to just Woodford Reserve. I like it better, and they call it a finished bourbon because they put it in a heavy charred different oak barrel. But it's not imparting any sherry or port wine or anything like that into it. It just gives it a oakier flavor. All right, so Maker's 46. It's a little, when I say something's bright on the nose, what I'm talking about is a little sharper, more of an alcohol singe, sort of on the nostrils. But it has typical bourbon notes to it, and you really don't taste that much, or you don't smell that much of a difference between Maker's 46 and Maker's. On the nose, they're very similar, but on the palate, It coats fairly well. I know Crazy Ann's going to laugh, but I talk about legs on bourbon. I can see her in the basement laughing. But legs are basically oils in the bourbon, and you can see the trails run down. And when you swirl it or take a drink, it leaves droplets, and then they start running down the glass. And you have to get the light just right on them sometimes. Excuse me. And you can see them. These are thinner than some bourbons, but it's not a bad bourbon. I like Makers. Arcade, cheers meow. Okay. Oh, was that the Bama? Was that the Buffalo Trace that they have, or Makers 46? I don't know. I've talked about a couple of them here. Hey, Rajay, how's it going, my man? Yes, sir. We're having fun. Okay, so we've had one suggestion here. Somebody, you can see them back here behind me. You know, what do you want to know about? I can tell you. Oh, Buffalo Trace, man. If they had Buffalo Trace, I'd be all over that. I love that neat. I'm gonna taste a little more of this Elijah Craig. I can go either way. It depends on my mood between Makers 46 and an Elijah Craig. I think Makers 46 is not quite as silky on the tongue, but sometimes I talk about I like a little of that burn. Oh, Hudson. All right. Hudson. Now this is a little bit different here. This is New York, straight bourbon whiskey, so it's not Kentucky. Hudson Baby Bourbon. So let me pour just a little bit out of here. And I'm not pouring much because depending on what we do here, I'm trying to keep these glasses separated, and I know that one's that one and that one's that one. I'll just have to touch the glass to the bottle. That way I know which one I'm trying. Swirl this Hudson around just a little bit. Yep. Okay. So I don't know. I can't remember the mash bill on it. I did a review on it, and then I looked up the mash bill right after I did the review, and I can't remember. But it reminds me a lot of Scotch on the nose. That buttery nose on it. It's not as pronounced as a Scotch, but there's some notes in it that remind me. It just puts my mind to that. Mm-hmm. And it has a different flavor. So if you want to put bourbons against each other, or you want to have a shelf of say 5 or 6 bourbons, I think Few is a good one to put up there because of its higher rye content, and Hudson because it's going to contrast those other bourbons. I think Elijah Craig is a good one to have up there. That's going to be your sweeter one, and then Hudson's not that sweet. It is good. I like it. It's not so much like Scotch on the palate. It's more when you first nose it, especially after nosing a different bourbon. But I like it. It's creamy, buttery, but not butterscotchy. I have some monkey shoulder over there. That's what I kind of put to remind myself of the Scotch notes. Of course, monkey shoulder is a blended Scotch whiskey, but it's a blend of single malts. So you have that. All right, how long we've been going here? About 20 minutes. Any other suggestions? I went back and reset my palate with that Elijah Craig. That's instead of drinking water in between, I'm just drinking Elijah Craig in between. So that puts it out there. So I did bring this up. Oh, another one that's different is Willet Pot Still. that gives you a little bit of a contrast, but this one's kind of hard to find, depending on where you are. I found a bottle of it in Georgia. So we went down to Disney and we're on our way back and picked a bottle of it up from there. I do have Weller's Special Reserve. It's a big jug of it though. When I grabbed it, I thought I was getting, I was getting a 750 milliliter bottle because of the price, and I grabbed it. And as soon as I picked it up, I was like, holy crap, that's heavy. But I went on ahead and got it, a big old Magnum bottle. But I like it. I call Weller the State Fair bourbon. And I always give it like a nickname that reminds me, like, you know, honeysuckle, buttery, you know, whatever. And the reason I call it State Fair bourbon is it reminds me of when you're at the State Fair and you walk by one of those booths that do the candy apple, caramel apple, and it has a lot of fresh apple note in it on the nose and palate. And it does have a good caramelly flavor, but you can tell it's young, and you know, but that's sort of a base mash bill, and you know, they build off of it into the antique lines and things like that, and they may change the mash bill up just a little bit, but yeah, it is what it is. But I like it as a it is pretty sweet though. I think it's in line with Elijah Craig on how sweet it is. One I fell in love with. Now here's one that I got, found. It was the last bottle on the shelf, so it's the Duke, and of course there's John Wayne, you know, on there. But this one, it'll contrast your other bourbons too. This one is more, it's not floral like a rye, it's like earthy wildflower floral, and a lot of fruit notes in it. The nickname I have for Duke is mixed fruit. It's like fruit salad, that's what I was calling it. On the nose, you're getting some of it, but I'm anticipating what I'm about to taste, because I've had it before. Oh yeah, fruit bomb. That is really, really fruity. If you can get your hands on a bottle of the Duke, get it, because I mean, you know, it has so many fruit flavors in there. I'm tasting a little grape along with maybe some strawberry, wild berry, apple, you know, and all of that. It is a really, really good bourbon. Put that glass over there. So this one's Hudson. That one's Elijah Craig. Okay, got it straight. I just want to make sure. All right, and another one that people like is Basil Hayden's. I can see it back there behind me, but one I have kind of hidden is Angel's Envy. I'm not a huge fan of true finished bourbons. A lot of people go nuts over Angel's Envy because it's finished in port wine barrels. So they age it, you know, in new American oak, and then they move it to the port wine barrel and let it age longer. It's all right. I have another finished bourbon over there. I can't remember the name of it, or did I bring it over here? No, it's still over there. And it's aged in I think Cabernet barrels. It doesn't really taste like a bourbon anymore sometimes, depending on how long it's finished and what it's finished in. But I buy them and try them, so you don't have to. But, you know, really what I wanted to do with this live stream is, if there's a bourbon that you've had your mind on, or you don't know if you want to spend the money on it, or, you know, you want to get a gift for someone, throw it out there. I mean, I'll give you some suggestions. I know I don't have to tell Robot Scott anything. He can probably teach me several things. But Jefferson's Ocean, I do not have a bottle of Jefferson's Ocean right now. I had like that much left, and I put it in my infinity bottle. And so it's hard to get here. So in North Carolina, and the only reason I don't have some of those bourbons anymore is I can't really travel right now to go get bourbon. Because of, COVID cases on the rise, and I don't want to get out in the middle of all that. But I'm sort of at the mercy. Here in North Carolina, we have what's called an ABC store, and it's a board, state-ran liquor store. And depending on which ABC you go to, it will be a part of either a large board or a small board, and the larger one is here around Winston-Salem. I live close to Winston-Salem. I can travel a little bit further and go to one. I just found this out not too long ago, just by talking to him at the ABC store, and he said, yeah, you need to go down to this other ABC store on down the road. They have, they can get special order you stuff. So, hey, Eric. Yeah, I was showing, actually, Eric in the chat, I have 2 bottles of his, and I don't really pop them open because I'm saving them for him. But before the COVID stuff hit, he would come to my bourbon tastings here at the house, and he would leave, he would buy bottles of bourbon and leave them here. And I've told him several times, just let me know. We'll get them to you if you want them back. So, but you can see that's his Willet, by the way. My Willet I bought last year or whatever. This is his. Okay, 1792. Some people love it, some people hate it. Let me. It's actually on the other shelf. I will be right back. And this is the only 1792 I have. I do not have the, I think, what do they call it? Is it foolproof or something? Anyway, the cast strength barrel proof. This one is the small batch. So this is 1792 small batch. I am not a huge fan of it, but it's definitely not a bad bourbon. So let me pour a little bit in here. And even though that topper looks fancy, it's plastic. So, all right, let me give this a swirl. Typical bourbon notes. Vanilla's coming through. A little bit of oak. Getting a little spice on the nose, just a little bit. Pretty thin on the legs compared to some of the other bourbons. I mean, it's not super thin, but it's running down pretty quick. Yeah, I haven't had it in a little while. It's not bad at all. Yeah, I mean, it has some decent notes. It's just few noted, put it that way. It doesn't have a lot of depth to it. It's semi-sweet, not down at the bottom of the sweetness scale. Yeah, Eagle Rare. If you weren't here when I first started, Eagle Rare, what I would suggest if you really want some Eagle Rare is get the Michter small batch. From one day to the next, if we were doing a blind, I don't know if you could tell them apart. I really don't. I've put them side by side. They are very similar in notes and flavor. Eagle Rare is a little bit darker. It's a little bit more into the darker caramel, where Michter stays up a little bit. But that is one, if you like Eagle Rare and you're craving it, get a bottle of Michter small batch. It's really good. I think what puts some people off on 1792 is it doesn't really coat the tongue very well, and you get a lot of weird notes up the middle instead of typically when I get notes off the bourbon, I'll get sweet up the middle, some spices and some wood notes and things, and it kind of flares out. I get a lot of stuff right up the middle of the tongue with 1792, but it's not a bad bourbon at all. Yeah, Eagle is really, really good. I'm going to set this glass up here by the 1792 so I can remember. Let me grab it. Hey, if y'all want me to drink Eagle Rare, I'll drink this all night long. This is a fantastic bourbon. I went on ahead and poured more. Yeah, this one here. And I'm having to drink it slow. You can see I'm kind of getting down the bottle. It's going to end up in my infinity bottle after a couple of more times. And I'm hoping, now a lot of times here, one thing they do at these ABC stores is they don't put stuff out on the shelf. If they know it's a hot ticket item, they don't want someone accidentally buying a coveted bourbon that people would want, so they hide it under the cash register. And when I walk in now, I just walk right up and say, do you have anything behind the counter? And they'll look at me. Sometimes if they do, they'll say, what are you looking for? That means they do, and they know me well enough now, I'll just go in alphabetical order. So if they know who if they recognize me when I come in, they'll tell me. But I'll just start with Blanton's and go all the way up through Eagle Rare and everything else. Yeah, and they also, though, they put Buffalo Trace behind the counter only because they don't get that many of them. Yeah, that Eagle Rare is really, really good. And the Eagle Rare 17 is good as well, but I don't have it. All I have is a regular. Oh, wow. That is fantastic. Man, it has, it's a woody candy. That's the only way I can explain it. And you're starting to get into some of the leathers and a little hint of tobacco in there. That's a good aged bourbon. I mean, they took their time. It's a great mash bill. You can tell that they took care of it. They put it in the center of the rick house and they didn't let it get too hot. And that is a fantastic bourbon. That's artisan bourbon. On the Eagle Rare, it has great legs. They are running down fairly slow, and they're fatter than a lot of these other ones. Good, thick, muscular legs. Coats the entire tongue really, really well. And you do get those wood notes off of it. If you like more like a Tennessee whiskey though, I can tell you, it's very smooth. It is incredibly smooth, but so is Michter's. Both of them are really, really easy sippers. They will hurt you if you, because you want to keep going back for another sip of it. And if you drink bourbon too quick and too much, you will regret it tomorrow. But yeah, it's very, very easy to drink. But like I said, so is Michter's. Michter's is really good as well. Now this is the only non-bourbon I have on this shelf over here is Bernheim. This is a Kentucky straight wheat whiskey, so this can't be called a bourbon because it's all wheat, so there's no corn in it. But some really, really good notes out of this as well. Really, really good. It reminds me a lot of Uncle Nearest. And if you like Jack Daniels and you like Tennessee whiskey, get you a bottle of Uncle Nearest. I promise you will not be disappointed. It reminds me of like a field of like a hay field and with wildflowers growing in it. I mean, it is some great, great notes in that Uncle Nearest. One of my favorite Tennessee whiskeys. I'll tell you what, that's a pleasure right there, that Eagle Rare. Now, anything else, yeah, the Woodford Reserve, yeah. Woodford Reserve, the only one I have is the double oaked because I like it so much better, and it's only like $5 more around here compared to regular Woodford, to the Woodford double oaked. And it is really, really good. I really enjoy it. It is on the sweeter side. A lot of people like it because it is sweet. I have also seen people request a Woodford Reserve, maybe not double oak, but if they have it, they might. But a lot of people will get the regular Woodford and they'll say, put an orange peel in it and muddle it, but don't put simple syrup in it. Because they just like the little orange citrus kick, maybe a dash of bitters or something. And that's about it. But it's a really, really good bourbon. And I like it neat. I think this stands up to smoking a cigar, if it's a sweeter cigar. The one that, my favorite on the shelf, the two that run pretty much side by side, but it's expensive, is Booker's. And not all Bookers are made equal. The one I have is a 2019-03 Country Ham. And they call all of their bottles something, their batches. And this one they dubbed Country Ham. But this is a good dark bourbon, but it's also 62.35% by volume, 124.7 proof. This is a good one that will give you the biggest Kentucky hug you've ever had right there. So there's that. And one of my absolute favorites is Blade and Bow. And we talked about this the other night. Blade and Bow has a lot of hype behind it with their backstory. And they say, oh, we had some of the original stuff and we never drained the whole barrel, and then, you know, they mix, it's called Solera aging, and they're not the only ones that do it. It's a process where when you empty a barrel, you just leave some in the barrel, and then you put fresh, bourbon or whiskey at that point back in there to let it age. And I don't know, in order to be called bourbon though, it's supposed to be a new American oak barrel, so I don't know if they take what's left in that barrel and put it in a brand new oak barrel. I don't know. But otherwise, I don't know how they could continue to call it a bourbon. Adding that already aged stuff in with the fresh batch gives it a lot more complexity. So you get a lot of good notes out of that, and definitely get more leather and tobacco out of that than most other bourbons. And around here, it's sub $50. I think $45, $46 or something like that. So, kinfolks in the house. Oh, Eric Gerhardt says he's sipping on Basil Hayden. It's good. However, for what you pay for Basil Hayden's, it's 40% by volume, 80 proof. Now I know the rule I had on the 40% by volume, 80 proof is typically when they produce a stronger whiskey, and then they blend it down with water. Now, of course, if it doesn't say barrel proof on it, they've put some water in it. But this is a really good low proof bourbon. And it actually has good notes to it. So. And the other thing I'm a fan of, I know I've mentioned it on a couple of my videos, is blended bourbons. Sometimes you have to be careful with the blends, but Four Roses small batch is a hell of a deal for the price, and it's a blend, right? It's Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey crafted from 4 select bourbons, and I'm sure they're using the Four Roses bourbons, but that's a good one, and it'll give you some rye notes to it, but not super heavy. Some people like rye, some people don't. I like it all. I can drink it, any of it, and enjoy it. That Eagle Rare just got me completely away from the Elijah Craig, but you get what you pay for. So, man, there's some good darker fruit notes in that Eagle Rare. Elijah Craig has more like fresh fruit notes. And then, the fruit salad over here, the Duke, it has way different fruit notes, and it is a fruit bomb. Drinks with a food, a ribeye steak. All right, ribeye steak. Definitely, if I picked one off my shelf, I would grab the Booker's for sure. Old Elk. Yeah, Old Elk's a really good blended bourbon. Now it is a blend. Let me leave that glass there. I have one glass left, guys. One glass, and it's actually a Glencairn glass, the real Glencairn glass. So I'm going to put Old Elk in here. So otherwise, I'm going to have to go get a different glass. Yeah, 5 different yeast strains. Yep. Yeah, Old Elk is really good. But if you like Old Elk, I think you'll like a lot of them. Another one's Breckenridge out of Colorado. Old Elk, this is 44% 88 proof, so I call it a lower proof simply because I kind of rate everything off of a 90 proof. And if it's lower than 90, I call it lower proof. Let's see, this is the Old Elk, bottled by Old Elk Distillery. And that's another thing to look for. And what I wanted to call out was, it says, I don't know if that'll focus. Let me see if I can get my face out of the way. There it is. Bottled by Old Elk Distillery. So what you'll have is sometimes you'll have, it'll say bottled by, and it won't say distillery. It'll say something different. And, if it doesn't say that, they probably are procuring their bourbons. And they're purchasing bourbons to blend. So they may purchase things from different distilleries and buy the whole barrels and then put them together and then pass the cost on to you. Yeah, Old Elk, man, it's going to be tough after the Eagle Rare. But I'm starting to get to where I can't pick up as many notes. Oh yeah, that's it's a darker note to it as well. Not as dark as say Booker's or Eagle Rare, but it's getting down there a little darker in the notes than certainly Elijah Craig or Maker's. And way darker than Duke. Duke doesn't have a lot of darker notes to it. It's, like I said, it's fruit salad. But if you can get your hands on a bottle of it, I'd highly recommend it. If I were going to put together 5 bourbons of completely like juxtapose each other. Duke would be one of them because of its fruit content. I think Elijah Craig because of its sweetness. Eagle Rare because of how dark it is. And I wouldn't really, I mean, if you can get yourself a Booker's, but they're $80, $90. I mean, they're up there. I don't like recommending things too high in price. Because if you don't like it, I don't want you coming back saying, Bourbon Bounty told me to spend $100 on it. No, I didn't. I did not. So, but I like it. I really enjoy it. You know, but I would have to put some wild turkey in there somewhere. And the Longbranch is a really, really good, to me, really good bourbon. But you have to like, we used to smoke meat with mesquite. And I went deer hunting out in Texas, and there's a lot of mesquite trees in Texas. And the deer eat on the mesquite trees have these little pea pod looking things that grow on them. And the deer eat those things, and it flavors the meat. And, you know, they talk about corn feeding a cow or a pig or whatever, you know, it changes the flavor where it's not so gamey. But that's for, you know, grocery store stuff and all that. But the deer out there eat a lot of mesquite, and it flavors the meat. And then if you smoke with mesquite, it's a sweeter smoke, you know, on the meat. And that you can pick up those mesquite notes out of wild turkey Longbranch. It has Matthew McConaughey's name on it, but you know, he's not a master distiller. But I guess it was his flavor profile working with Eddie Russell. You know, so we know who distilled it. Yeah, that Old Elk is good. I like a blend because it gives you just this, a lot of different notes comes together at once. Oh yeah. Yeah, splurge on it if you want to, but yeah, I would put, let's see, what for? Few would be my pick for a higher rye. Elijah Craig for base sweetness. I would pick Wild Turkey Longbranch because of the uniqueness of the mesquite that they finish it in, and then Duke for the fruit bomb. And then probably, if I could get my hands on it, definitely Eagle Rare. If I couldn't, I would probably do the Blade and Bow in there for the darker tobacco leathery notes. Yeah, this is the Eagle. Had to put my pinky out when I did the Eagle Rare. Oh yeah, old elk with an elk steak. I don't know. I guess it could stand up to it. Yeah, I mean it definitely has some good notes in it. After a while though, I'm mixing all these bourbons. I'm trying this one, trying that one, and they're starting to run together on me just a little bit. But that's where you come back to the Duke. Get that fruity contrast in there. That one stands, that's the one that kind of stands on its own. I really, really like it. Elk steak with cranberry sauce, that sounds good. Yeah, my wife makes a homemade cranberry sauce every year. It's really good. Made me think of it, but that's only around Thanksgiving. Yeah, Eric Gerhardt, Yum Yum Michters. Yeah, it is. That is some good stuff. Like I said, if you can't find a bottle of Eagle Rare, I would highly recommend Michter Small Batch. All right, a little bit, another taste of the Old Elk. We've been going about 49 minutes here. I'm gonna cut this off here in just a few minutes. If anyone has any last minute things that they want to hear about or suggest, I'll be happy to do that. But one I'm going to recommend before we get off of here is Yellowstone. And it's 93 proof, but this is Yellowstone Select. And it says something about some proceeds go to benefit Yellowstone National Park, but this is Lebanon, Kentucky, Limestone Branch Distillery. This one, earthy, some good earthy notes to it. So that's a good one to try if you haven't tried it. I don't think you'd be disappointed. My cord got wrapped around my boot. Let's see. I do not really recommend this one. It's not expensive at all, but I think it's overpriced and it's not even expensive. It's okay, but Bird Dog also makes like peach bourbon or something, or peach flavors or whatever, but and other flavors. I've seen them. I won't buy flavored alcohol like that, but then let's see. Oh, Larceny is another good one for a cheaper. I mean, it's not dirt cheap, but it's on the lower end. Like Elijah Craig's, fairly affordable. Larceny is also fairly affordable, and it's not as sweet as Elijah Craig, so it's good to have them both and try them against each other. I think both of them stand up well for what you're getting some good notes, not a whole bunch of good notes, but you're starting to get into where you can start to dissect notes, and that was what I was talking about regular Jim Beam and things like that. Is the lower end bourbons and like Benchmark. Benchmark is like a $10 for 750 milliliters or something. And it's from Buffalo Trace Distillery, but it's definitely not Buffalo Trace. I would, if someone come over and said, hey, I don't like bourbon straight, I want to mix Coke with it, I'd give them the Benchmark. Here, knock yourself out. I don't care. I can always run up there and buy another bottle of Benchmark. But it's so watered down that it hides a lot of notes. And I have a video I put out about learning to nose bourbons, and it's also about learning to taste it. But because aroma and taste are closely related, but you're making a nosing kit, and some things you don't have to worry about making anything. You open a little thing of cloves and stick your nose down there, and you're going to smell cloves like crazy. But some things, you need to soak it in 40% vodka. And it's sort of like making an extract. But you put stuff in there and set it on the shelf for a few weeks and come back and pop it open. And it's going to give you that essence off of it. So, put some white oak chips or something and some vodka, let that sit there and steep a while. Come back and nose it, and vodka doesn't have a strong aroma anyway, so really what you're getting is just the essence of whatever you put in there. It's the same way you can make your own vanilla extract, put vanilla beans in there, but vanilla extract you can go buy at the store, or you can just do it with the vodka. But yeah, if you get a bottle of vodka and things that just don't readily give up their aromas, go ahead and put them in the vodka and let them soak a while, and then come back and smell it, and you'll start getting those notes off of it. And then try to find it in the bourbon. But if you haven't experienced something before, you're not going to find it. And you'd have to have lived under a rock. But if you've never smelled cloves before, you don't have that to give as a note. So if you want to get into nosing bourbons and really dissecting them, you have to broaden your vocabulary with, and your senses with picking up those notes. But basically, when they char the inside of a barrel, But that bourbon, or it's not bourbon yet, but the whiskey that's laying in there, turning into bourbon, is extracting notes out of that wood. So that's why we can pick it up. All right, so that's about all I have, guys. Thank you for joining in. I'm going to go ahead and end this. I was almost late. We had a power outage earlier, and I started to send out a notification saying I wasn't going to have this live stream, but the power came back on about an hour before the stream, so trying to be as professional as I can and going ahead, and the show must go on and all of that. But thanks for joining. As always, please like and subscribe, hit the bell down there for notifications, and I promise I'll keep bringing you these videos.